You know, there has been survey after survey made of employees in all kinds of organizations. And in these surveys, employees are asked what is their complaint, the main complaint that they have about their boss. If they have any complaint at all, what would it be? Would you like to know what comes up number one over and over again? They don't feel heard. Interesting, because their biggest complaint isn't that their boss is a micromanager, or that their boss has poor communication skills, or that their boss plays favorites, or anything else. It's, I don't feel heard often enough. And that's an issue because employees who do feel heard are far more productive, effective, confident than those who don't. So today we're going to take a look under the hood at that whole experience of being heard, figure out what it is, what people mean when they say they don't feel heard, and then show you how you can change that and get that feeling for them time after time. Now, being heard is not simply being listened to. Your dog listens to you. Your Amazon driver listens to you. The neighbor with a tree growing over your fence, they'll listen to you, but they don't produce the feeling of being heard. When someone has the experience or the feeling that they've been heard, what that means is they have felt visible. They have felt important to you. They have felt like they matter to you. When they haven't been feeling heard, they don't have any of those things. Now, listening is the crux of the matter. But here's the issue. There's a problem for all of us in terms of listening, and that is that people tend to speak at about 120 to 150 words per minute. But we tend to be able to listen comfortably and easily to people who are speaking up to 450 words per minute. So most of the time when you're listening to someone, there's a huge gap between how quickly they're sending it and how much room you have to absorb it. And you got to fill those gaps with something, so what do? Well, for lots of folks, they spend the gaps between what they're hearing and when they're about to speak with figuring out what do they think the speaker is going to say next. Or they spend that time thinking about, what am I going to say when it's my turn to speak? They might be simply evaluating what they're hearing and deciding whether they agree with it or disagree with it. And they could even be spending those gaps figuring out what are they going to have for dinner tonight. None of those strategies creates a feeling of being heard for the speaker. Now, it's true that most of us, if we're called and we're put on the spot and said, are you listening to me? We can parrot back what we just heard, or at least part of what we just heard, word for word. But that doesn't mean we really understood any of it. It just means we're able to recite it from memory. What did I just say, you'll hear? You said blah, 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 blah. You may have gotten the words right, but you still haven't conveyed the experience to the other person that they've been heard. In order to convey that experience, you got to do three things. First, you have to be willing to paraphrase what you heard, not recite it word for word like a parrot, but paraphrase what they said and put whatever they said into your own words. When you can translate it into your own words, that proves that you got it. And secondly, you need to capture what they're feeling about whatever they're talking about. Maybe they're mad about it, maybe they're happy about it, maybe they're scared of something. But you need to be able to identify what that feeling is. And when you can do that, that takes judgment out of your response. And finally, you need to check in with them to see if you got it right. That's when people start to feel heard. So, they speak, you translate it into your own words, you figure out what do you think they're feeling about it, and you repeat it back to them. You say all that back to them to see if you got it. For example, Bob comes into you one day and he says, that new parking policy is stupid. It rewards people who have higher positions in the company rather than people who come to work earlier. They reserve parking for VPs and division heads and all that. And those of us who are just poor, ordinary working slobs who get here at 6:30 in the morning to go to work have to park farther back in the parking lot than the others, and it's just not fair. Now, a typical listener might say something like, yeah, that's something else, isn't it? But that's not conveying a feeling of being heard. That's simply passive listening. So you could help Bob have the feeling of actually being heard by actively listening. You're saying the new parking policy isn't well thought out and that it rewards the wrong people and makes you pretty frustrated. Is that about right? And Bob will say, yes, that's about right. If he says, no, that's not quite it, then just do it again. Just say, well, tell me more. And after he finishes his second try, paraphrase that, attach a feeling and feed that back till you get Bob to say, yeah, you got it. Because when Bob tells you, I got it, that means Bob's telling you, I feel heard. Now, would you like to get better at being able to make people feel heard? Well, you need to practice. It's not something you just do. It's something you learn to do after practicing it for a while. But fortunately, it's not that hard to do. Find a friend, ask them to give you a hand. The two of you can work on it together. In fact, they could even do the same thing you're doing. But here's the deal. You ask the friend to think of something they care about and then to tell you about it. And then see if you can paraphrase what they just said. That's all. Just paraphrase. So they say something, you say, well, it sounds like what you're saying is, and they either nod their head yes or they say no, and you keep doing it. When you get to the point where it's coming fairly comfortably, you can paraphrase it and start attaching a feeling. So what I'm hearing you saying is this, and it sounds like you feel that. Again, do that enough times for them to be nodding consistently. Yep, you got it. When you can get to the point where you say, you're talking about this, and it sounds like you feel that, you got it. And you can start using that in your practice every day to get more people to feel heard, genuinely heard by their boss. There are very few things you can do to make a relationship stronger beyond helping people feel heard when they talk to you, connected to you when they talk to you. And remember, when people come to talk to you, they don't always need you to agree with them. They don't always need you to jump into solution. They don't need you to solve the problem. They need to feel heard. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.